I hope you guys all found that information valuable. I know I did. I learned a ton. And actually, I'm camping right now. It's my husband and I's anniversary, so we're just up camping in the Dixie Forest. We have a little creek running by, and some people like blocked off a little pool so they could have a little deeper water in the creek. And I noticed that there's some cyanobacteria growing in that little pool. So interesting to know. I'm glad that I knew that it was a cyanobacteria so I could keep my dog from drinking in that area. I'll post some pictures of what I see as well as Hannah's website so you can get a lot more information, a lot more pictures. And yeah, like I said, if you guys want to be like citizen scientists and let the researchers know where you guys are finding the cyanobacteria, they can't get to some of the places that we can. So that would be great information for them to have. And if you have any information or any questions for Hannah, reach out to her. She would love to answer them and just talk to you more about how to recreate safely in this water, how to stay hydrated, and how to stay safe. Yeah, if you enjoy this podcast, please support it on Patreon. It's patreon.com. We have our monthly canyon calls. I'm doing those on Thursday now. I've had something come up in my life, so my Wednesdays are taken. So I'm doing it the first Thursday of every month. And it's just a way to get to know the people that support the show. Once in a while, I have guests on. I'm going to try to do that more often. During the winter, we might just practice knots so that we can stay efficient on our skills. And yeah, it's just a fun way to get to know the people, get to know different canyons in the area or in different areas, I should say, because I have supporters from all over the country, which is awesome. If you don't want to do Patreon, you can also do PayPal and Venmo. Also, reach out to me if you have ideas for the show. If you have flash flood stories or a near miss and want to be on the mini episodes, let me know about that. If you have some epics tales or, an accident story that you want people to learn from. If you have a gear company that you want people to know about, or guide company, anything like that, just reach out. Like, we want all of the canyoneering community all over the world to know about what's going on all over the world. And so what a better way to do that? I'm just here in Little Podunk, Utah, and I don't know everything. I have been kind of off of social media lately. So if you have some stuff going on, let me know so I can let the community know. Reach out at thecanyonsarecalling at gmail.com. And the Canyons Are Calling. I'm going to go. Hello and welcome to the Canyons Are Calling podcast. It's Charles. I've missed you guys. I have been in a little bit of a funk the last couple months, and I've just been working on my body and some emotional, personal things, and I apologize for the delay in this podcast. When I did the interview in July, I was super stoked and I wanted to get it out right away. I felt like the information was like really relevant for the time, and then my mind kind of shut down. I kind of went into this weird place emotionally with things that are going on in my personal life. And I'm sorry. I feel like I've kind of let the community down. But I'm trying not to be too hard on myself. Like, honestly, I'm doing this thing and telling these stories and getting the information out there. So better late than never. A person said on the podcast a while ago, the How Not To guy, can't think of his name right now. Sorry. It's super good enough. So the audio on this interview was, I didn't have the right cord on Hannah's side. And so she's a little bit quiet. I apologize. I tried to do everything I could. I couldn't make the time to do another interview with her. And I felt like this was some really good information. So it's not super bad. It's definitely better than when I was recording on my cell phone in the beginning. So please bear with me. This is just one of the mini episodes, kind of one of the flash flood, like mini series. It's just an episode about the cyanobacteria that's going on pretty much everywhere, but specifically in the Zion area, and makes the water toxic and makes you not want to drink it. And this is some ways that you can look for some signs that you can look for to know that if it's the cyanobacteria, and then like where to know to filter water or not filter water, and just some suggestions, because dehydration is bad. Getting toxic water is bad. Recreating safely is awesome. So it's kind of the point of this podcast interview. It's shorter than most of them. It's just kind of the mini episode. I've got a few more with the Flash Flood series and the near misses. So hopefully you guys like those. And hopefully I get back on track and I can, get out of this funk and get back in the swing of things and get back to recording. I have some stuff recorded. I just need to edit it. And speaking of that, if anybody wants to help me edit, like, that is the biggest holdup of this podcast. I have interviews. I love talking to people. Like, I could talk canyons all day for hours and hours. But editing is the hard part for me. So if anybody wants to edit these podcasts, let me know. Reach out, please. Like, I would really love some help. I do have a little bit of cash flow coming in with my few Patreon supporters, so I could kick down a little bit of cash, and it would just help the community out. So yeah, think about it. If you are into audio editing or know anyone that is, let me know. And also, if you'd like to support me on Patreon, this is solely done by myself. Interviews, the editing, the research, all the things, totally done by me so far. So if you would like to support me, if you find value in these interviews and in this podcast, that would be awesome. You can do that at patreon.com/The Canyons Are Calling. And then also I have Venmo and PayPal. The Canyons Are Calling for PayPal and Cheryl's Rocks for Venmo. I'll have links to all that shit in the show notes. So anyway, let's get back to this interview with Hannah. We talk a lot about just the cyanobacteria and how you can recognize it, how you can be safe, how you yourself can be a citizen scientist and help the water researchers find where the cyanobacteria is growing. So I'm going to have links to Hannah, as well as the website for the company that she works for, and you can see pictures on there so you know what the cyanobacteria looks like and where it's most active and how to be aware of it, so that you're not filtering toxic water, you're not letting your dog drink toxic water, and you're being safe in the canyons. It's good to know that it isn't really growing in a lot of the canyons because they're too dark and don't get enough sun. So we are able to filter, if you want to, that water. But honestly, like, when I have like bats and maggots and potholes, I don't really want to filter that water. So I try to just carry what I need, which is sometimes heavy, but it's better to err on this side of caution. So anyway, without me babbling on anymore, I miss you guys. I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy my interview with Hannah.
The canyons are calling. Let's go.
So today we have with us Hannah, and she is here to talk cyanobacteria. How are you doing today, Hannah?
Oh, good. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for reaching out. I feel like this is definitely a topic that a lot of people have either not very much knowledge about or misinformation about. So I really appreciate you wanting to come out and clear up a couple of things.
Yeah, this is a new issue even for the scientific community, and so it makes sense that a lot of people in the public are also confused. So hopefully this will bring some clarity about this issue and can help people make safe but also measured recreation decisions.
Awesome. So first of all, if you could just give us a little bit of background about how you got into the outdoors, and then lead into like what you do for a living and how that ties in with what we're talking about today.
Sure. So I have always loved the outdoors. I grew up here in Utah and spent a lot of time in the desert from a very young age. In terms of canyoneering, I actually worked as a park ranger at Capitol Reef, which is when I first got introduced to canyons.
Oh,
And it
that's
was
one of my
love at
favorite
first sight.
parks. I love it there.
Yeah, incredible. And so I've been canyoneering for about 7 years now. Really love it. And actually, canyoneering is what got me interested in benthic cyanobacteria. When I was in grad school, getting my PhD in hydrology, I ended up doing a fellowship through the ESA, actually studying flow and its relationship to benthic cyanobacteria, and working with the National Park Service in Zion National Park to better understand these species. And I found them so fascinating, especially because they were affecting areas that were so important to me in my recreation and my personal life. And that ultimately led to me in receiving my current position. And I work for Utah's Division of Water Quality now as an environmental scientist. And specifically, I'm the lead for Utah's recreational water quality program, which basically means our harmful algal bloom response and expertise, and also waterborne pathogens, which again encapsulates that benthic cyanobacteria issue.
Okay, wow, interesting. Who knew water could be so fascinating?
Yeah, it's the whole world.
It is our life. Very cool. So first of all, what is cyanobacteria and what does it do?
So cyanobacteria is really awesome most of the time. It's one of the oldest Earth life forms. It's been around for billions of years, and it's a photosynthesizing bacteria. So basically a bacteria that acts like a plant and uses sunlight for food and for energy. And cyanobacteria naturally occurs in every single water body on Earth. So it's always there. It's always been there. We worry, though, about cyanobacteria when we have blooms or large growths. And the reason that is because certain species of cyanobacteria, as part of their life cycle, can produce toxins that can be quite harmful to both humans and animals. And so if we have large areas of growth and then human exposure, you can have negative consequences where there's health effects or, in extreme cases, even death.
Yeah, I've heard recently like a couple of dogs have passed away in different cyan area because of the bloom in the Virgin River. Is that?
That's correct. Yeah, we're still waiting final results, but we believe a dog passed away just this past week from cyanobacteria exposure. And we also had a number of cases earlier this year, so it's no joke. And even on humans, the Utah Poison Control Center receives several hundred calls every year from people who have likely been exposed to cyanobacteria and are experiencing negative health effects.
Dang. So is it filterable through like water filters, or does that not take it out?
Yeah, well, I think maybe to answer that question, the other confusing piece here that I think is particularly relevant to canyoneers is that we almost have two flavors of cyanobacteria.
Okay.
So there's the cyanobacteria that forms what you'd imagine as a typical harmful algal bloom. You might have seen pictures. It's when the water turns a bright green color. You get like really weird texture. It looks like pea soup, or someone dumped a can of paint.
Right.
And usually that's in standing water. Like you see a lake or a reservoir turn this really neon color. Which I think for most of us, we'd see that and be like, ooh, that looks scary. Like, I'm not going to drink that water. I'm not going to swim in that water. And that's usually what we think of when we think about cyanobacteria, is these lakes, reservoirs turning bright green and being dangerous. But there's also the second flavor of cyanobacteria, which is what we call benthic cyanobacteria, or harmful algal mats. And that's more what Zion and, in fact, rivers and streams across the United States and the world are starting to experience. And unlike the harmful algal bloom cyanobacteria, this benthic cyanobacteria actually just grows in concreted mats, so almost like a rug or a coating that will be on aquatic vegetation, on rocks, on the bottom of a stream or river, and is a lot less obvious. And so, you might have a huge growth of benthic cyanobacteria present in a section of the river, but you're not immediately going to see it or notice it because the water itself looks great, but there's this benthic material that actually is present underneath the water, or sometimes floating up along the shoreline.
Are either of them like okay to deal with, or no?
Yeah, so both types of cyanobacteria have the ability to produce toxins. The way we're exposed to toxins is a little bit different, though. With a harmful algal bloom, that planktonic cyanobacteria, the toxins are dispersed throughout the water column. So even if you drink the water, you're going to be exposed likely to a lot of toxins. With the benthic cyanobacteria, the water itself is usually pretty good. The way you get exposed to toxins from those benthic mats is by ingestion of the mat material itself. So say you're a dog and you smell this really musty cyanobacteria mat, and so you munch it up, then you're going to get a really high load of toxin. Or more from the human perspective, which is almost what you were bringing up, Cheryl, is say you're filtering water and you accidentally are filtering right on top of one of these mats. Then you're agitating those cyanobacteria cells, you're releasing those toxins, and now the water you're filtering is full of toxins, even though the typical river water would have been fine. Or the other thing is recreation, and this is why we worry a lot in big areas like Zion National Park, is say you're a little kid and you're splashing around in the shallows, but unfortunately those shallows are full of these benthic mats. Then again, you're agitating that material, you're putting it into the water column, and then if you dunk your head and take a gulp, again, there can be a lot of negative exposure.
So what are some pointers for us as recreational canyoneers to not agitate the water and be able to get through a successful day, like through heaps if we need to filter water?
Yeah, so I didn't answer your first question. So filters, we're not sure. We haven't done enough studies to know whether or not filters can remove those cyanotoxins. So right now there's no proven handheld filter that can pull them out. So we don't recommend you rely on that to avoid getting those toxins, which I think means, in terms of filtering water, being cognizant of where that water is coming from, which requires a little bit of work and education. So knowing what these benthic cyanobacteria mats look like, so that, if, say you're doing North Creek and so you're going to be backpacking for a few days, when you are filtering water, you know exactly what to look for, and so you're not going to be accidentally filtering on top of a cyanobacteria mat, nor are you going to be accidentally disturbing a mat in an area where you're drinking or swimming or making contact with the water. So that's a really big pointer, is knowing what to look for and taking the time to look for these species, and then making choices to avoid contact, avoid agitation, and just avoid doing anything that could allow that material to somehow get inside your body. The second tip is also knowing where these species live, and this is good news for canyoneers. Because this is a photosynthesizing bacteria, it needs sunlight in order to thrive and to grow. And so in really narrow canyons, like Heap's a great example of that, we actually don't see this growth because there's just not enough sunlight. And I look a lot for this stuff, even when I'm canyoneering for fun. And in any of Zion's most narrow canyons, whether it be Heaps, Inlay, Keyhole, I haven't seen these species growing. Where we do see them, though, is areas where the canyon may open up wider. So, for example, say, the end of Pine Creek, we have seen those species there, or some of the wider sections of the narrows. So it's kind of a combination of being cognizant, is there the right habitat for a photosynthesizing bacteria to live, and then knowing what to look for so you're avoiding contact, filtering, anything that could disturb those areas of mats.
Does it grow in Mystery?
I have only looked thoroughly for it once through Mystery. I didn't see it that time, but we don't have enough data to say conclusively yes or no. I can see some wider areas in that canyon where it could possibly be.
I went through Mystery with my friend Raven, who is also a science.
Oh, yeah, I know Raven. She's
okay,
great.
Awesome. Yeah, and I feel like she pointed some out to us in there, but it could have been a different canyon. I've done a few canyons with her, but Mystery just stands out. I think it was one of her first.
Yeah, it's really possible. And it's not like it always is in the same place. It grows, it moves, sometimes it's present, sometimes it gets scoured out by flash floods. So unfortunately we can't just be like, here's all the safe places, here's all the unsafe places.
Right, I'm sure it's also more prevalent like in the late summer than in early spring or something like that too.
Exactly, like lots of long sunny days.
So one weird question that just popped up in my head when we were talking about like filtering and stuff, if you have the cyanobacteria upstream and you're filtering downstream not knowing it's up there, is that going to be contaminated, or does the toxins die off shortly after it leaves the area that's contaminated?
Yeah, great question. So these toxins can persist from anywhere to hours to days. So they don't just immediately decay once they're released. And so that definitely is a concern, especially if there's something that could be disturbing mats upstream. Maybe your buddy is splashing around right upstream of where you're swimming or filtering. So that is something to be aware of. And it's not that the toxins die off, they do get diluted pretty quickly once they're mixing in with, especially if it's a high flow stream or river. But that doesn't undermine the risk, which I think is why a lot of entities, National Park Services, health departments, have just had their blanket recommendation to be filtered directly from straight or springs. Don't even mess around with the water. Just because, you can definitely do a lot of things to reduce your chance of having toxins present, but you can never guarantee there's not something upstream being disturbed.
Would like iodine or boiling the water help in addition to the filtering, or?
So unfortunately, no, and that's one of the tricky things. So the toxins are contained inside of the cyanobacteria cells, and so the toxins actually get released when the cells die. So boiling the water just releases all the toxins.
Gotcha.
Iodine, same thing. Even hand sanitizer doesn't do anything. It just kills all the cells and makes the toxins available.
Wow, okay. Dang, so just make sure you know what it looks like and to avoid filtering near that if you need to.
I mean, those are... Okay. Obviously, if you can carry your water, which oftentimes we can, that's just the best, easiest, safest way to go.
Right.
But, in extreme cases where you run out of water or it's just not practical, then just be smart about it. Know what to look for. Our website actually, which is harmful algal blooms, HABs.utah.gov, has a whole photo gallery, so you can look at pictures, know what to look for.
Okay, awesome.
Don't filter on top of that. Don't eat any of that. Don't have your buddy stomping around on that while you're filtering downstream. There's some precautions you can take that really, really reduce the risk.
Okay, awesome. I'll definitely have a link for that in the show notes so people can go and look and make sure they know where not to get their water. But also know that it's not in a lot of the canyons. So if they do get in a situation, they will be safe filtering water.
Yeah, well, just being able to weigh the risk and, the consequences of dehydration can often be much more severe, especially if you do these things to mitigate risk in water sources.
Yeah, I agree. For sure. Plus water, it is heavy, but not really. Just plan on carrying what you need.
It's definitely safest. And I think, too, like I mentioned, this is an issue not just in Zion National Park, but all over the United States and the world. And we found these species in many other areas just around Utah, which is what I'm most familiar with. So it's something to be aware of no matter where you're going. If there's flowing water, always keep an eye out.
Awesome. Are there any other water issues that we need to worry about?
They're waterborne pathogens are another thing we think a lot about, which is basically poop contamination, whether that be from livestock or people in the water. And that can lead to things like giardia, a lot of vomiting, diarrhea. And so that's why we always recommend you do filter your water if you're going to drink it out in the wild, just to reduce the likelihood you'll expose to those bacteria or viruses or parasites.
Yeah. What kind of filter do you use?
So I use a UV filter if I'm really confident in my source as being pretty good. And then I just have a traditional pump filter if it's a little more questionable of a source.
Nice. Yeah. I've had both too. I like the ketamine one, and then I don't know that I trust the UV one. I don't know why, but we brought it to Costa Rica with us just in case. I felt fine there.
It's straight out of the spring, or I feel like it's been in the water's been in the ground a while. I'm like, probably it would be okay to drink. So I feel like the UV at least eliminates the viruses and some of the nastier pathogens.
I feel like I remember as a little kid, my dad would just have us drink out of the mountain creeks that would flow down, and we never thought about filtering it. And now I would never encourage my kids to do that. It's so crazy. All right, is there anything else that you want to touch on about the cyanobacteria or the water?
I think just maybe we can put this also in your show note links, but we do have a website, that same one, HABs.utah.gov, where we'll inform the public about advisories or things to be aware of around Utah. And I would imagine other states have a similar setup. And so those advisories, often issued by health departments or the National Park Service, are basically a good read too on what conditions might be like on rivers or streams that are being monitored. So Zion's a great example. The Park Service will actually issue anywhere from a health watch to a warning to a danger advisory. And that's all dependent on the amount of toxin production they're seeing in a water body. If you just have a health watch, that means that these toxin-producing cyanobacteria species are present, but there's not significant toxin production. Versus if you're at a danger advisory, it means that these species are present and we're measuring toxins at a threshold that could cause permanent to lethal damage to a human or animal if it was ingested. So that can also be really helpful as you're thinking about risk, as you're making decisions, look at the latest data and be able to be informed going into it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, very good to know. I'll definitely have a link to that one as well. Any other websites or ways to get a hold of you?
Like I said, this is still an emerging issue. When the dog died in Zion National Park back in 2020, that was the first time we'd even been aware of these species in Utah rivers. And that was actually only the second time in the entire United States we'd seen this kind of toxin production. So we're only 3 years out from that, and we're still learning a lot about these species, about their toxin production, about where they occur. And so we definitely want your help. Canyoneers especially are out in a lot of backcountry remote areas in Utah that just aren't practical for our monitoring team to visit. And so I would love if people know what to look for and are seeing a lot of this growth in areas they're visiting. We definitely want that information. That helps us put together a more complete picture and be able to pass that on to other recreators. So I'll pass on to you too, Cheryl, my contact info, and I'd be happy if people would reach out and share that information or observations.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. What's your favorite canyon?
Ooh, finally got to do Collab just last year, and I still think about it a lot. That was a spectacular one.
Yeah, I haven't done that one yet, but I hear amazing things.
It was just so good, and even the hike out was just gorgeous.
So I've done part of the MIA when I did Pipe Springs.
Oh, yeah, not that
and
part.
So, yeah. And one time we did it, like, as it was downpouring rain. And, like, luckily we finished the canyon when that happened. So we were not in, like, a crazy situation. But hiking up the MIA while everything's just downpouring, it was crazy. And then the rain stopped as we were hiking on the road part, right? Where it's just like hot and muggy and miserable for an hour and a half. You're just like, could rain now. That'd be great.
That was good too.
Yeah, maybe I could do that this fall when they stop releasing water. That'd be fun.
Yeah. I did not see any benthic cyanobacteria that trip, but you'll have to keep an eye out if you go back.
Do you feel like that one gets flushed out enough with the release of the water from the dam that it wouldn't have an issue, or is it like deep and dark and doesn't get enough sun? Or
I mean, definitely the technical portion is pretty deep and dark, so I'd be surprised to see some there. There were some wider sections as you're hiking out up to the MIA that could be possible. Yeah. But yeah, you bring up a good point. Flow is also important. Flash floods, monsoon season, dam release. That does tend, at least from what we've seen so far, to scour out these mats. But I could see, maybe like later in the fall, if we have consistent low flow for a month or two, it could start growing.
Okay, awesome. Definitely something to keep our eye on.
Yes. But I think the nice thing is, like, once you understand what's going on and what the risk is and what the exposure pathways are, then you can also make decisions you feel good about. Like we said at the start, I think there's just a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding out there that either makes people disregard it as a risk, which I think there's consequences from that, or also, overreact and be unwilling to touch any water anywhere, which I think also is going too far. So I'm really grateful that I could be on here, and hopefully this gives people a little bit more context so they can have a measured response where they're still cautious and cognizant, but also it doesn't stop recreation.
For sure. And people get less dehydrated, because that is also a very huge issue.
Yes. Drink lots of water.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I really appreciate your time and getting this information out to the people. Yeah. It is.
Love to do collab this fall.
Right? That would be awesome. My shoulder's getting better, so I should be able to get out there again. Yay. All right, I will have your information in the show notes for everyone to reach you and some pictures for people to look at so they know what they're looking for when they're recreating. And see you in the canyons.